Hello and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. By means of introduction, my name is Tamara Howes. I am the Underwriting Product Development Manager for CIB. I joined the insurance industry in 1996, in December of 1996. I walked out of my matric gates into my father's brokerage. And as it so happens with most people in the insurance world, the bug bites us, and there I stuck around in the broking world until 2015, where I joined CIB. I'm actually now enjoying my 10th year. I've gone into my 11th year, and I really hope that you guys are going to enjoy today's session. Please note that this is not a CPD accredited session because it is product-specific training. And we also won't be going into a live Q&A session. If you have any queries or any questions that you'd like to reach out to us about, please can you connect on referrals@cib.co.za, and we will gladly respond to any queries that you may have. In addition, once we've concluded all the sessions, we will provide those folks that reach out to us on the referrals mailbox with a link either to the recordings of the session or even the training material, whichever you require. But we are here to be with you every step of the way. So thank you very much, and I really hope you enjoyed today's session. So I think the first thing I'd like to do is picture this. Okay, we have a peaceful estate at sunrise. Sprinklers are running, the birdies are chirping away. It's a quiet morning, families are going about their routine, a small business is preparing to open. Everything is just normal. Everything is rustig and people are getting prepared for the day. But then, without warning, disaster strikes. A geyser bursts, water comes pouring through the ceiling, and we have absolute chaos. And then the phone starts ringing. Not to CIB first, but to you, the broker, because they trust you to have anticipated this, and you need to know what to do and who to call in order to fix it. This is why what we do matters. This is the moment where trust becomes tangible. It's not about technical clauses. It's not about the wording. It's all about protecting livelihoods, managing this chaos, and delivering peace of mind. And you are at the center of all of that. We have a jam-packed session for you today, ladies and gentlemen. At CIB, we understand that insurance isn't just about ticking boxes. It's about protecting communities, investments, and ensuring peace of mind. Naturally, as I mentioned, no one understands that better than you, our valued brokers. We are going to dive into one of our most important and fastest evolving product areas, that is our specialist or specialized buildings insurance array. From sectional title schemes and homeowners associations to commercial properties and individual homeowners, clients can rely on the products that deliver clarity, compliance, and real value. We are here to make sure that you have the tools, the insight, and the confidence to do just that, with some of the strongest products in the market and a phenomenal support team that truly understands your world. So let's explore what makes our range unique, what your clients need to know, and how you can turn insurance conversations into trusted partnerships. So on the agenda today, you will find we're going to discuss how our products work, with a view to the CIB methodology, our flagship products and how you can differentiate them, the operative clause, the sections that are available, general exclusions, the top 5 most breach conditions, what you should look out for. We'll touch on certain definition terms, which you will see is pervasive across all of the products in general. So I'd like to touch on those because I think those are key to unlocking how these products operate. We'll touch on construction, common property, how we view damage. We'll talk about pipes, occupancy, subsidence and landslip, retaining walls, water apparatus, replacement and repair, sectional title insurance, commercial buildings, HOAs, residential homeowners, CSOS, fidelity guarantee, why you should consider these products, how CIB makes your life easier, what you should always consider, real-life claim examples, and then, of course, an extra layer of protection before we close off for the rest of the day. So let's look at how our products work. I think what you'll observe throughout all our products, we like uniformity, and it's important for us that the first thing you realize is that our products on the SB side are all written on an all risks wording basis. So it's not your traditional perils base. Cover applies for all forms of loss or damage, except where an exclusion applies or if there's a monetary limit that could restrict it. From a liability perspective, this is done on a broad form wording basis, and of course it operates on a claims made basis. So the event must occur and be reported during that policy period. All the wordings are written in plain English. So we have tried as far as possible to remove the old archaic jargon that used to be used, and legal terms are only really included where it's necessary. Part one of all of our products goes in, and as I said, it's all uniform, but that deals with our introduction, CIB, service commitment, protection and sharing of personal information, your core information and responsibilities of the policyholder, your duty to take reasonable steps and precautions, and then CIB complaints and compliance information. You'll observe that it's only the SEC product where we refer to the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act and the Sectional Titles Act, respectively. Owning a building is, after all, a business. And as we do with all of our clients, we have an expectation that our clients understand their legal responsibility as property owners, that they comply with all the laws, that it's very important that they read and understand the insurance contract, that they know that the policy is not a maintenance contract. They should maintain and inspect their property regularly. Recognize that occupancy status impacts risk and must be disclosed, and act as if they were uninsured, except for where a valid claim should arise. To take all reasonable steps to mitigate damage. Obviously, we don't expect our clients to be Houdini and mitigate all loss. I mean, otherwise our industry wouldn't exist. But to, as far as possible, make sure that they've taken the necessary steps to have prevented whatever they could have. Legal compliance is part of the critical duty of care elements. And of course, fire equipment must be installed per the regulation. It must be serviced annually by a registered technician, and fire compliance is essential for claim validity. COCs. This is something that is always going to stick around. It's required when ownership changes and even when electrical repairs or upgrades occur. Remember, the body corporate is responsible for common property electrical systems. And obviously, it needs to comply with the SONS. COCs must be available upon request at claim stage. Buildings must always comply with the national building regulations, local authority requirements, and the relevant occupational health and safety laws. Having said that, remember now, all aspects that are common to all sections are obviously grouped together under your general sections, and we'll unpack that now. And, that's obviously to avoid repetition. But looking at our flagship products, we have sectional title, we have our commercial buildings, homeowners associations, and as you can see on all of them, it deals with either residential and commercial, and in the sectional title in CBC world, we can cater for mixed use as well. Of course, you have the house owners, which deals with your individual residential houses, and your standalone fidelity guarantee. All the above, as I mentioned, are underwritten on an ORIS basis and can be differentiated by the prefixes on the actual policy number. So sectional title is usually dealt with under the SEC, and that's the wording that would attach to that. Commercial buildings is CBC, homeowners associations are HOAs, house owners is under HOR, and then finally, FG will then speak to our fidelity guarantee. The sections that we have available, I've tried to group these for everybody so that it's just easier to identify which section is applicable per product. So we have our buildings and common property contents, that's SEC, CBC, HOA, and HOR. Water apparatus and repair, again, that will apply to all four. Your money section only applies to sectional title and HOA products. Public liability is under SEC, CBC, and HOA. Later on, when we go to the actual product highlights, I'll just emphasize what limits of indemnity are available in terms of the liability sections. Employer's liability, trustee's liability, which only applies to the sectional title product. D&O, which is available under CBC and HOA. Personal legal liability for HOR only, because obviously that deals with those individuals. You have your fidelity guarantee and computer fraud, which is available as a section on SEC and HOA. It is underwritten and a premium is charged. And then, of course, you can also have standalone FG policies in play. Machinery breakdown is available under SEC, CBC, and HOA, and personal accident is available under SEC and HOA. Motor vehicles, we've only introduced it to the SEC product for the moment. We obviously need to see how it's going to run, and at the moment, we've had pretty good take-up on it. We want to see how it runs on the product, and then we will look at whether or not we will branch it out to either the CBC or the HOA products as time goes on. So keep an eye out for that. Moving on to our operative clause. I think sometimes the operative clause can seem quite overwhelming. And for the most part, that is the clause that contractually binds us and the insured to our contractual obligations. And all it really says is the cover is only provided if the premium is paid and all policy terms and conditions are met. If an insured event occurs during the policy period, we then embark on the golden R's, which is your repair, replacement, reinstatement, or we can pay cash in lieu, or even a combination of all of those replacement options, but always subject to the terms, exclusions, sums insured, excesses, and indemnity limits. The full agreement comprises of the application or proposal form, the policy, and the schedule, as well as any formal variations that are issued. No claim is valid if the premium is more than 1 month overdue or if the annual premium is unpaid at the time of an insured event. Please note that we still have to adhere to the general condition with regards to payment of premium. So we do have the allowance in terms of the grace period, as is required by TCF and PPRs and PASA and all of that. So our general conditions are aligned to that. If a claim happens during the time the premium has not been received, obviously it will be kept back and will only be dealt with once that premium has come to hand. If a premium is returned for any reason other than insufficient funds, like for instance, the insured goes and stops that premium, then obviously we will not present the account again because that tells us that they don't actually want the cover. If cash is paid to the policyholder, they must complete the repairs or replacement within a reasonable time. We are not liable for any increase due to the policyholder's delay or inability or even their unwillingness to reinstate. And we will only pay for the cost to repair or replace damage and not anything more. Our general exclusions. I think a lot of people sometimes wonder why we have so many. First of all, these are generally as a result of treaty requirements. So all of our general exclusions are aligned to our treaty agreements. And first to the party, I think it's been the very first SIA exclusion since time immemorial, deals with war rights and terrorism. As you know, war is a national concern where the government becomes involved. And besides that, we actually have a fund that's been established in terms of the South African War Damage and Compensation Act that would actually deal with that. Any other kinds of disorder, political or non-political, that's usually available under SASRIA. So our policy does not extend to cover any type of war right and terrorism. Your nuclear and institute radio contamination, again, this has been around since forever. It always used to be your nuclear risk exclusion, but now it's branched out a bit more to deal with weapons of mass destruction. It's obviously in place due to the catastrophic potential. Many governments have established a specific framework and funds to handle the financial consequences of nuclear incidents. I don't know if you know, but in South Africa, for example, the National Nuclear Regulator oversees our nuclear act. Of course, there's also a lack of actuarial data, which means that there isn't historical data or sufficient data in order to be able to price the type of risk that is involved. So that will probably, those two are probably the top two that will remain in place for a very, very long time. What you'll notice is that all our products deal with two cyber exclusions. And the one deals with property and the other one deals with casualty. Now, the main difference is the property exclusion has a limited carve-back, which states that in the event of a cyber incident, if it triggers an insured peril like a fire, for example, that damage that is caused by the fire is still covered in terms of the policy. However, any business interruption, which is referred to as a time element loss, or any liability, that still remains excluded. So the damage component that is deemed to be an insured peril will then still be covered, even though it was a cyber incident. The casualty exclusion, though, that is an outright exclusion. And there's no limited carve-backs or anything, and that really brings in your bodily injury component, any PR notifications and crisis control management and all of that. So those types of things remain outright and are not covered in terms of the underlying policy. Asbestos, again, we've seen it's been around since time immemorial. It's a comprehensive exclusion because asbestos-related risks are typically excluded due to obviously being carcinogenic, and there's a lot of environmental hazards that also breach out. So from a liability perspective, the policy will not pick up any type of asbestos-related incident. We then deal with consequential and indirect damage and or loss as an exclusion. As you know, accidents are sometimes much more than just the initial event, and they do have far-reaching consequences. And where you'll find the direct loss, so let's say it's a fire, for example. Those damages are pretty easy to deal with, and obviously the policy will cover any sort of consequential loss through virtue of loss of rent or revenue that could stem from it. So there, the policy will not exclude the consequential component. The difficulty comes in when there are other consequential or indirect losses that could be triggered, and that's where we do not pay any events. So assume for the moment your client goes out and has to go and retrieve documents from an accountant, and they now wish to claim for petrol and time lost. Those are indirect losses. The policy doesn't cater for that. As you'll see, fraud is another one that's been around since time immemorial as well. That comes to the fore under both the exclusions as well as the general conditions, and then pre-existing loss or damage, that is excluded. Your material damage proviso, that's a new one that came in on our treaties recently, and all it aims to do is it says that there's no cover for BI or contingent business interruption or consequential losses unless it's due to fire, lightning, explosion, storm, wind, water, hail, snow, impact, earthquake, or other natural catastrophes. Those are the main perils that will then trigger any sort of loss of rental or revenue cover. Damage by tenants is excluded. Communicable diseases, similarly to your cyber, is dealt with under property and casualty. The main thing is obviously circa 2020 with the dreaded plague that got everybody stuck in lockdown. There were a lot of lessons to be learned, and you will see that the reinsurers deal with it quite differently now, especially when it comes to the infectious disease component. So these are outright, especially under a short-term insurance type policy. Your sanctions, that has also been around for quite a while. What you'll notice on ours, though, is that our policy version extends to note Switzerland, and it also qualifies German EU law applicability. It's a little bit more explicit in terms of the embargo recognitions as well as the enforcement and scope. Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus is also added as an exclusion. Grid failure, as we know, that's been around for a while. Pollution and contamination, that's added in as a general exclusion. In the specialized buildings world, it's been around as a general exclusion for a long time. But please note that if it is sudden, unforeseen, i.e. accidental, and hasn't happened over a period of time, the policy could still potentially respond, especially under the liability components of cover. Finally, we deal with our excluded risk exclusion. And, instead of reading off 50 million different slides, I've categorized those excluded risks for you to make it a little bit easier. So taking a snapshot of the excluded risk, we don't cover any illegal occupation or use of insured property, as well as illegal electrical connections to or from insured property, confiscation, seizure, or forfeiture by authorities, incidents occurring outside of South Africa. All our risks or property that is insured is within South Africa. So obviously incidents that occur outside of South Africa wouldn't be covered here. Any claims that are lodged in a foreign jurisdiction, damage by animals, the water table fluctuations, faulty, inferior design, materials or workmanship, corrosion, wear and tear, gradual deterioration, basically anything that happens over a period of time. And finally, legal or illegal mining activity or gas-related explosions. So that was quite a mouthful. Having said that, we have quite a number of general conditions, and they're exactly the same across our products. We have 22 of them under the specialized buildings product. But if you want to consider how those impact how cover is placed, let's look at the top 5 main offenders. First to the party, we have late notification of claims. And later on in the session, we'll actually unpack a real life example claim. And that was also one of the contributing factors as to why the claim was rejected. Failure to disclose material facts. We are so passionate about material facts, it's just not true. Even if a fact doesn't seem like it's relevant, everything is relevant. So please impress on our clients, disclose, 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 because anything that could impact our decision on whether or not we want to accept or continue with the risk is affected by this. And again, later you will see how this impacts cover. Non-compliance with statutory regulations. We are not here to be draconian and impose our will on people. But realistically speaking, compliance with regulation is actually a legal duty that protects the client from any other legal things that can actually go wrong. From a policy perspective, insurance and the law run very close together. And it's very important that our clients comply with these regulations. Whether it's the installation of a water apparatus or an installed solar, it needs to comply. Building regulations need to comply. Maintenance neglect. Insurance policies are not intended to be maintenance policies. So in many cases, you'll see how clients actually don't look after their insured property. And as a result, it leads to claims. And unfortunately, that is a breach of the policy condition. Finally, breaching claims conditions. I think a lot of the time people are not aware that claims conditions are there to give you a clear guideline on what needs to happen if an insured event takes place. Many times, our clients will go and carry on with repairs or replace something. They won't take any photo of what's actually happened. We won't have an opportunity to actually inspect or assess the damage. And we are actually severely prejudiced in those instances. So part of the claims conditions, we've highlighted the process that needs to be followed so that we can make sure that our clients are put back in the position that they were in prior to a loss arising. Remember, forewarned is forearmed. Proactive advice reduces claims conflict and boosts our clients' trust. So please bear this in mind. Moving on to our definitions, what I've tried to do here is explain it across the 3 main products that have buildings applicable and how we will look at this. So first of all, under SEC, buildings are obviously in a registered section or title scheme, inclusive of all permanent improvements and common infrastructure that's owned by the body corporate, which are of standard construction, unless agreed otherwise. Standard construction is noted on all of these products because, and we'll discuss it in the next slide, standard construction is very important, and disclosure of non-standard construction is even more important for the validity of cover being in place. Your CBC risk speaks of buildings that are listed in the schedule that you own or are legally responsible for. Again, there's a big difference between being legally responsible for something and just being responsible. Again, of standard construction, it includes permanent improvements, plant and equipment, owners' fixtures and fittings, paved areas, fences, gates, walls, and fire equipment. Finally, looking at HIA risk, that your common use areas and structures collectively owned and managed by the HIA. As listed in the schedule, Included in that, we have plant and equipment, your roads, walls, and fire extinguishing equipment. Back in the good old day, standard construction used to be referred to as massive construction. I don't know if people still refer to it as such. But it really boils down to walls being built of brick, stone, concrete, with your roof being made of slate tiles, concrete, asbestos, and metal. When it comes to non-standard construction types, these are the ones that must be referred, and we need to actually accept it. So you're looking at thatch, we're looking at wooden structures, shingles, gazebos, new tech. New tech is a new one that's now reared its head. We've done a lot of investigation, and it definitely falls within the realm of non-standard construction. This consideration applies to any part of the insured property, not just the main building. Looking to common property contents, this generally refers to movable items that are owned by the body corporate or a homeowners association that are used to operate or enhance the shared property environment. Cover applies only if the contents are located on common property. Forcible and violent entry is required for full theft cover inside the buildings. Please encourage clients to review and update the contents list annually, especially after new purchases or refurbishments are made. Keep an updated asset register. I mean, it is required. It needs to include the description, make, model, serial numbers, the location, in which part of the common property does that asset apply. So is it the gym or the clubhouse? Is it in the office? And we need the replacement values and, of course, the value and the date of actual acquisition. What do we mean by accidental and what do we mean by damage? So first and foremost, accidental means that something sudden, unplanned and unexpected has happened. It's happened at an identifiable place and time. It must be unintended and unforeseen, i.e. not deliberate. And it must not be gradual, known or anticipated. Damage refers to accidental. As you see, in many cases, these definition terms dovetail into one another, which is why it's very important to be familiar with those terms. Refers to an accidental event that has resulted in an unforeseen physical loss, damage, or destruction of insured property. So the event is covered if the cause of the damage is an accidental event and the event is not excluded under the general or specific exclusions. Damage is not covered if it happens over a period of time, if it's due to wear and tear, and of course, if it was known. If we talk about pipes, a pipe refers to a cylinder or tube forming part of the water or gas reticulation system in the insured building. It includes connections, valves, junctions, stopcocks, but it does not include taps, faucets, shower or bath traps, as well as shower hoses. Irrigation systems is also not deemed to be a pipe. So putting it into application, a burst pipe means that there's a sudden and violent failure of a pipe. We will cover the repair of the pipe and immediate resultant damage. Happy days. Leaking pipes are a different kettle of fish because those generally refer to leakage that's caused by wear and tear, gradual deterioration, flaws, latent defects, and similar. So we do not cover the repair or replacement of a leaking pipe. We also do not cover any fixtures that are not defined as pipes. If a leak is reported immediately, we may pay for the resultant damage only. If the reporting is actually delayed and damage is now exacerbated due to the delay, we may actually only pay a portion of the claim, or we could deny the claim entirely. This is very important, especially in the world of buildings. A lot of the time, you'll find that damage has been as a result of a leak. So it's a very important term to make sure that our clients are familiar with. Know the difference. Unattended, unoccupied, and vacant. These terms are vital So unattended generally means that no authorized person is physically and continuously present at the premises. So a common example is you pop out to the shop and you leave the property temporarily empty. Unoccupancy is different. It means that the building or unit is empty, is disused, it's unfurnished, or it's not in active use by the insured or a tenant. So even if a new lease is signed, the unit is still unoccupied until that tenant physically moves in. Any contractors or security guards that are sleeping on the site does not constitute occupancy and is therefore precluded entirely. When we look at vacant, it obviously means that the building or the unit is empty, unattended, it's not operating, there's no business activities taking place. Conversely, it's even been unlawfully occupied. This must be disclosed to us in advance. As I mentioned, our doors are open, speak to us. There are cases where we are still able to stay on risk to assist you. We might exclude things like malicious damage, but you could still have fire cover, for example. So let us know. Let's have a discussion, because if you don't, that's a material fact, and unfortunately, cover will be voided. It's always good to ask the questions. Are these premises furnished? Is there any chance of the premises being left empty for more than 31 days? Are any parts of the building vacant or intended to be vacant? Use this to trigger the disclosure obligations, and to avoid uncomfortable, uninsured scenarios. Some of our common covers, I'm going to go into that now, are things like subsidence and landslip, retaining walls, power surge. Those are common covers that you'll see across most of our products. Subsidence and landslip is included on all our specialized buildings products, and unless we've decided otherwise, i.e. the risk is located in a geographical location like Centurion or Irene, those are the only instances where we could come back to you as an underwriting decision not to provide cover. But the policy generally, even as an extension, still needs to be approved, even though it's part of the extension coverings. It covers sudden and unforeseen subsidence and landslip, which causes damage to your buildings and or common property contents. In the case of SEC risk, obviously each unit owner bears their own excess. Claims are not aggregated at scheme level. Due diligence must be observed. As I mentioned earlier on, there are geographic limitations in that there's no cover in specified high-risk zones. We maintain a list of areas, so we know exactly which areas cannot be underwritten. There are cases that if we receive certain geotech reports and investigations, we could possibly extend the cover and grant the allowance, but that is on a referral and acceptance basis. Please remember that preventative works are not covered, so cost of strengthening or preventative underpinning is precluded. And always remember that if we reject a claim, that the onus will rest on the insured to prove otherwise. Retaining walls. Again, all our products have storm damage cover for retaining walls. A retaining wall is a structure that is designed to restrain soil to an unnatural slope. Very importantly, a retaining wall must be specifically designed for the purpose intended and needs to be built to restrain that lateral force of the earth, or ground or rocks or whatever other material the structure is supposed to be holding back or supporting. In the event of a claim, we will request the original specifications by the consulting engineer who actually designed the wall, but cover can and will be provided, up to R1 million. Again, there are regions that we don't actually accept. So at new business stage, underwriting discretion will apply. Our guys will quite clear up and will give you guidance where that is concerned. If you consider the types of walls that are involved, I mean, there's so many different types. You get gabion walls, you get precast concrete retaining walls, brick or masonry retaining walls. It really does depend on the type of risk that is being underwritten. And one of the questions that was asked yesterday is, are there walls that we don't cover? Well, the answer is, as long as that wall is actually designed and built according to the specification, we will cover it. In sectional title businesses, you'll see that gabion walls are quite popular, especially in Gauteng, in the Western Cape and KZN, due to the durability and drainage benefits that apply. You get your precast concrete retaining walls. That's like your Terraforce and Loffelstein geolock type walls. Those are used widely across all provinces, especially in estates and complex developments. And then you've got your brick or masonry retaining walls. Those are common in urban areas, particularly in Gauteng and Cape Town, where sectional title properties often maximize space, and they will then make use of those types. So if there's a tip to be had, check a quote stage if the client has retaining walls at the risk, and prompt them for engineering plans up front, if at all possible. Section 2 deals with water apparatus and repair. We cover sudden and unforeseen failure or bursting of water apparatus as per the prescribed standards. Covered components are your actual cylinder, your safety and pressure control valves, isolating and expansion valves, your mounting brackets, the insulation, and up to 1 meter of the connected pipework. Unit owner's water apparatus is also covered where applicable. It's very, very important that you inform CIB of the geyser type that is applicable to an insured risk, please. If it is not disclosed, cover is actually restricted to our standard electrical water apparatus limit that is noted on the schedule. If a geyser is excluded and we have not been offered an opportunity to write the cover, then there is actually no cover. You'll see under this section, we've given clear definitions as to the different types that you can insure, and we've specifically mentioned the ones that we are prepared to offer cover on, as well as the ones that we're not. So if you look at something like a pool heater, for example, that's not covered in terms of water apparatus and repair as a section. If the call center is used, then the replacement costs that we've stipulated will not apply. So whatever that replacement cost is, we will then pay in full. We won't apply any specific limit. When you're considering the water apparatus section, all water apparatus must meet installation and maintenance standards. Educate clients about annual inspections as well as sacrificial anode replacements so that they can preserve claims eligibility. Cover may be denied if clients do not follow manufacturer maintenance or warranty schedules, so promote proactive maintenance as a condition of cover. Understand what's excluded, the common pitfalls. Systems without storage or basin units, boiling water heaters, those are generally automatically excluded. Solar, gas, heat pumps, and indirect systems are only covered if they've been specified and accepted by us. Claims are subject to those specific policy limits that I've mentioned above. So your electrical water apparatus up to 150 litres is covered for 11,100. Obviously, if they've made use of our call centre, that's unlimited. And then finally, promote additional installation expenses. That is an optional extension, and it deals with any additional costs or access costs rather for roofing, electrical joinery. So actively offer and explain what that extension is, um, especially when you're busy with your policy structuring. Just to give you some idea as to the types that we have here. So here you've got an example of a water heater without inbuilt storage. Here's a direct thermosiphon unit. Those are pretty low-cost systems which circulate water through the solar collector. The heat then heats up and returns it to the supply. Conversely, you get an indirect thermosiphon unit that's a little bit more complex and costly. But this one actually uses a heat exchanger and transfer fluid, which makes it a little bit suitable or more suitable in colder regions of South Africa. And then you've got things like your under and over basin units. Let's unpack the actual sections. We have a risk and rating category that we utilize when we want to categorize risk and what drives the rating and the underwriting calls that we make. So if we look at SEC risk indicators, here you've got high risks. So that's like holiday letting, short-term rentals, students accommodation. And things that really drive those types of risk, you have high occupant turnover, they have limited vetting processes, there's an increased risk of property damage and liability claims, potential for over-occupancy. There's a high likelihood of vandalism and overuse of common areas. This impacts the policy. Obviously, higher premiums and negative endorsements need to be added. You have a high frequency of claims and, of course, a high risk of fire or structural non-compliance and liability claims. When you start looking at your medium to moderate risk, here you look at things like your mixed use, residential or commercial, your mature lifestyle estate. Your risk drivers there, obviously foot traffic and retail activity, which increase security and liability exposures. Your commercial activities, medical emergencies and evacuations are a little bit more frequent. And of course, you've got greater reliance on lifts and backup power and emergency systems. Your insurance impact there, generally assess commercial portion and its activities carefully. So there we would really look at your split rated covers. Stable occupancy and responsible residents often reduce some of that risk. Maintenance and safety system failures. I mean, maintenance again, muy importante, make sure. But this really can result in high severity claims, especially from a liability perspective. When we look at the cream of the crop, low risk, yeah, you've got standard residential, owner-occupied long-term leases, gated security estates with access control. Those have stable long-term residents, better property upkeep and community rule compliance. And from an insurance impact, they generally drive favorable premiums with predictable claims modeling and better risk management. High compliance with building standards as well as maintenance regimes, lower crime and vandalism rates. So these are really the type of drivers that we can look at when we are looking at the risk to be underwritten. So some key risk indicators to evaluate from your side. So regardless of the occupancy type, always assess maintenance practices of common property, security measures in place, your CCTV, guards, access control, conduct rules enforcement, very important. You know, what are the rules in terms of noise, subletting, alterations, compliance with municipal and fire safety regulations, and management quality, you know, the body corporate or the managing agent reputation. Broker recommendations from our side, always disclose unusual occupancies to us. Please, please, please. Certain documented evidence might actually strengthen your submission. So photographs, maintenance history, and that type of thing. Encourage clients to enforce conduct rules strictly and to be diligent about it. and maintain emergency systems like fire suppression and lifts. It should based on accurate replacement values and risk disclosures. I mean, that's a given. And you'll see now as we carry on where these rules of the values comes from. So compliance and legislative requirements. Why it's so important, first of all, the sectional title insurance is actually governed by the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, as well as your CSOS. These acts generally drive what needs to happen in terms of how the insurance is placed. It is not just risk management, it's a legal requirement. The body corporate must insure the building for its full replacement value. That includes your common property, all the units and the fixtures and fittings. Valuations must be performed every 3 years. Public liability and fidelity guarantee are actually not nice to have. They are compulsory per the CSOS regulations. The Sectional Title Schemes Management Act sets out the actual insurance responsibilities of the trustees. Section 31H emphasizes that the body corporate must insure the buildings and all improvements to the common property to the replacement value against fire, lightning, explosion, and any other such risk as may be prescribed. Your prescribed management rules then later go on to specify the types of risks to be covered, how insurance value should be determined, the process for owners to request additional cover, insuring against liability, excess amounts, alternative accommodation and relocation costs after damage, your public liability insurance, that is set at a minimum of 10 million rand. Fidelity insurance cover, that's of course linked then to subsection 31I of the Act. So here you can see we've actually taken snips of those pieces of legislation just for ease of reference. Buildings and common property contents, that sum insured must reflect the full replacement value of the buildings and common property contents. What's very important here is that the value must include your debris removal costs, your professional fees, and value-added tax. And that replacement value must also represent the cost to reinstate that property at the time of reinstatement and not at the time of loss. Unit owners are actually responsible for ensuring that any extensions, additions, or improvements made to their unit are added to that sum insured because those can increase the unit's overall insurable value. Ladies and gentlemen, before we kick off further, and I'm going to go into the actual product highlights shortly, we are going to take a bit of a break. We will go on break now from now until about 11:15, and then we can reconvene and carry on with the product updates. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you all got yourself a nice warm beverage and are ready to continue with our session. Moving on to our product highlights. Once again, you'll see a lot of the extensions that we offer manifest themselves across quite a few products. I'll just show you where the nuances are. Starting off, we have our automatic reinstatement of the sum insured that is automatically included and will trigger following a claim for loss or damage. We have our subsidence and landslip, which we've unpacked already. Building on another site is automatically included Floor space ratio is included. What you will notice in our wordings, we've indicated extensions that have a SASRIA implication by little asterisks. So all these extensions that would have a SASRIA implication would then have that noted at the end. So demolition costs is included up to 15%. Your professional fees included for 15%. Cost of submitting plans and obtaining building approvals is included. Fire extinguishing costs is included. Public authority requirements is included. Mortgage discharge fees is included. Loss of rent, revenue, and alternative accommodation. So here you'll see that the asterisks only appears after your loss of rent and revenue. Those are the only two extensions that would trigger SASRIA. They do not look at the alternative accommodation component at all. What this benefit actually does is the clause tells you that if you are the unit owner and you occupy that unit, then it will trigger the cost of alternative accommodation. Obviously, if you rent the unit out, you would then be able to trigger loss of rent or revenue, as the case may be. Remember, things like the unit not being occupied due to the failure of an air conditioning unit, that's not something that can trigger the benefit under your loss of rent or revenue component. Tenants that don't pay their rent on time, that cannot be claimed under here. This is all purely driven by the actual material damage perils. Please bear that in mind. Your failure of services, that's included up to the rental value, up to a maximum of 30 days. You then have your murder-suicide that is also included up to 30 days. And that's really only where an authority would prohibit the occupancy. Damage to gardens and landscaping is included for 25,000. Theft of common property in the open is included for 10,000 Rand. Reinstatement of documents is included for 10,000 Rand. Reward for information is included for 10,000 Rand. Your replacement of keys and locks. Emergency costs to minimize or prevent damage. That's your security guards and services that we provide. We usually allow for a maximum period of 5 days at about 2,000 Rand per day. Fallen trees is included for 5,000 Rand. Theft of exterior fixtures and fittings is included for 20,000 Rand. Water loss is included for 5,000. Power surge is included for 250,000 Rand. That's another common cover that we have. It's only 250,000 on the SEC product. All the other products have auto cover for 20,000 Rand. Those limits can be increased on application, but there would be an additional premium charged for that. Retaining walls cover, as I mentioned, we include that in the product, unless, of course, at underwriting stage, we've mentioned that we would not be able to facilitate that. It's included up to 1 million Rand. Hail damage to skylights and glass awnings is included up to 20,000 Rand. Our escalation and inflation, we include in the product up to 10% each. When we get to the actual optional extensions, you can then purchase cover upwards. So that would apply to your additional claims preparation costs. All products actually have 250,000 Rand set for claims preparation costs, and that is on a policy level. When you buy additional cover, it would then apply to the relevant section. The client can purchase additional escalation and inflation cover. You can then also purchase owners, fixtures, and fittings. There are 4 options of cover that are available, so you just need to select which one you'd like. It's up to a maximum of 250,000 Rand. Then, of course, we have our installed solar system. When we look at our ISS, there are several key factors to remember when it comes to the cover that's provided. Obviously, for us, it's very important that the system is specified as a separate item. there is a different premium that is then charged against that item. Cover is strictly subject to the client having a COC in place. And of course, cover cannot be brought into contribution with any other benefit that is in play in terms of the policy. The client must always comply to all the terms and conditions of the actual endorsement, as well as the terms and conditions of the policy. All installations need to be performed by suitably qualified electricians, and those electricians must actually hold their own CAR policy and liability cover during the process of installation, testing, and commissioning. Again, all cover is subject to sudden and unforeseen accidental physical loss or damage. Obviously, we will retain the right at our sole discretion on whether or not we repair, replace, or reinstate that system. And theft cover is strictly subject to forcible and violent entry. And in certain instances, we may impose a linked alarm. You'll notice that in certain cases, like on your CBC product, we will be a little bit more stricter in terms of imposing the linked alarm warranty. But again, please reach out to us if you feel that there are other security measures in place. We would be able to then waive that requirement. Our door is always open. There is a basis of loss settlement which deals with how we actually look at these claims. Your equipment other than batteries will be settled according to the replacement value, which is obviously set at the time of loss or the sum insured that's stated in the schedule. Batteries, depending on the type, are settled according to a depreciation scale. It's dependent on the age of those batteries. So, I mean, if you look at it, lead plate or acid batteries cost less upfront, but they have a shorter lifespan and would therefore require regular maintenance to keep them running properly. Your lithium batteries are a little bit more expensive upfront, but less maintenance, and would therefore have a longer lifespan to match the higher price tag. So we do look at these when we apply the relevant rate sliding scale. There's no depreciation for the first 5 years. We only apply the depreciation factor thereafter. Your battery energy systems are rated for approximately 12 years, or have 6,000 cycles until those batteries actually reach the end of their warranty or protected life. Obviously, your key causes that your ISS would lose value over time is due to normal system degradation or technological advancement. But please, 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 I beseech you, remember the sum insured must be sufficient to cater for any dismantling or re-erection or transportation, any import duties and VAT, and of course, removal of damaged property that's been insured. Very important. If we look to the sections that the product offers, we include money cover up to 100,000 Rand. We have public liability. We write up to 100 million. That is subject to a premium. Trustees liability under this product is included for 10 million Rand. That is included cover. I just want to quickly branch off here for a little second. On the SEC product, you are only going to have trustees liability, okay? Because the legal basis of cover, I mean, that type of business model is governed by your Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, okay? When you look at full title ownership, those are your CBC clients or your HOA clients. Those are really governed by your Companies Act. So they would then qualify for directors and officers cover. The reason why it's needed, obviously, on a trustees basis, there's a statutory obligation. The trustees can be held personally liable for any negligent or wrongful acts in their role. Conversely, on the D&O side, personal liability can ensue for decisions made while managing that entity. Some of the key features that you'll find, they're quite similar, but mostly you'll look at wrongful acts that are covered. So on a D&O policy, for example, you would have your breach of duty or misrepresentation or error in decision-making. Trustees liability, again, It deals with those fiduciary duties. It deals with those wrongful acts within the scope of the actual body corporate operations. From a compulsory cover perspective, it is required for the trustees to hold trustees' liability, whereas on a D&O angle, it's actually not legally required, but we strongly recommend that clients do have it. If you look at common examples of claims, I mean, it could be on a trustee's side, failure to enforce proper rules, late levy collections, unauthorized expenditure, or neglect of maintenance obligations. Looking at your D&O site, it could be poor financial oversight, mismanagement of maintenance budgets, and improper appointments. So if you consider your structure, your trustee's liability applies to those bodies corporate, whereas the D&O side would actually apply to formal legal entities. When we're looking at the underwriting considerations on trustees' liability, we look at things like the number of units, your annual levy income, maintenance history. On D&O, we would look at the entity side, number of directors, and of course the financial stability. So always remember, this is why we don't have the D&O section available under the SEC product. Our employer's liability is included cover up to 10 million rand. Machinery breakdown is included for 100,000, and personal accident is included for 20,000 rand. There are a number of exclusions. Now remember, all risks basis, everything's included unless it's been excluded. The easiest way to group that together is to really look at the types of risks that would be precluded. So I've grouped them together for you. First of all, consequential loss, that is excluded unless we've specifically stated it in terms of your loss of rent or revenue. Those are your right back covers in respect of consequential loss. When you look at legal liability, obviously that's not covered under your buildings and common property contents, but rather dealt with under the liability sections. If we start grouping the exclusions, we can look at it by property type, we can look at it by damage type, or we can look at it by site conditions. So property type, again, you see vacant buildings, any movable property in open air, skylights and glass structures, because there we have a right back extension that brings the cover back in. Same thing applies to your retaining walls and unfixed floor window coverings. Grouping it by the damage, you've got your cosmetic damages, defective design, faulty materials, maintenance, deterioration, or neglect. Looking at it from a site condition perspective, things like roots, damage by animals, insects, blocked drains, leakage from showers, those are the type of things that are excluded in terms of the product under the buildings and common property contents. Fidelity guarantee and computer fraud. The cover is available as a section, as I mentioned in the introduction, under the SEC and HOA products. Alternatively, you can also arrange a standalone policy. Brokers cannot buy bulk cover under the managing agent's name because each body corporate is required to have their own policy in accordance with the Act. Cover subject to written claims disclosure for a minimum of 3 years. Our quotes are usually valid for a period of 30 days and are obviously subject to the terms and conditions of the policy. Very, very, very important. A client must be able to show that they have a two-step verification process in place, especially in terms of the processing of any financial transaction that involves the monies of the scheme. We require a copy of the managing agent's Fidelity Fund certificate, and this actually needs to accompany the proposal form before we will grant the cover. There will be no cover if there isn't a Fidelity Fund certificate, and we generally steer away from Fidelity cover for self-managed schemes. We'll unpack a bit later on why we are not really keen on self-managed schemes. We also make use of the property practitioner's website to check the validity of the certificate, but of course, the certificate itself is first prize. Please also remember that property practitioners must be in possession of a valid fidelity certificate. It is only valid for a period of 3 years. The CSOS Act actually gives good guidance notes on how to calculate the fidelity sum insured. It gives you the sum of all the savings and investments of the scheme as at the end of the previous financial year, plus 25% of the current annual levies of the scheme. So you add those two amounts together and you are then able to calculate the FG sum insured that is required. The whole purpose of the cover is to protect the scheme. It's not there to protect the managing agent, please, please, please. It's there to protect the scheme against loss of money or property due to theft or fraud by people that have been placed in a position of trust. It's mandatory in terms of the CSOS Act for all community schemes. The policy protects the scheme, as I say, not the managing agent, and will apply to all the trustees, so those are your scheme executives, employees of the scheme, managing agents or property practitioners, but only if they are compliant with the Property Practitioners Act, and contractors that work under the managing agent's direction. What is actually covered? So there are two elements to the cover. We have insured events 1, that is direct financial loss to the scheme, which is due to fraud or dishonesty by those insurable persons. It brings in your computer fraud, inadvertent payments, extortion of scheme funds through threats of harm, as well as forgery or manipulation of payment instructions, provided that all loss must be discovered within that policy period and must be caused by somebody that is defined as an insurable person. That is referred to in the policy as your discovery period. What is not covered? So we don't cover any third-party cybercrime, so hacking and ransomware. Those losses are specifically excluded. And the computer element of this section specifically tells you that this section will not override or contravene whatever's been stipulated in terms of the cyber exclusions. We also will not cover any sort of poor internal controls. That two-step verification is very, very important. The policy doesn't cover breach of privacy or data protection, any acts of fraud by non-compliant managing agents, any type of Ponzi or pyramid scheme is not covered. That exclusion manifests itself again under your trustees as well as your D&O. Fines, penalties, or unverified bank detail changes is also not covered. And any loss that's discovered after the policy period or before the retroactive date is also not covered. And those managing agents who are not properly certified or who that don't follow the strict governance process will also not trigger valid cover. So what must the scheme actually do to stay covered? It's quite simple. Use a complying registered managing agent. Implement that two-step verification. Verify all changes to banking details directly with the bank. Proper governance and controls must be put in place. Access to the scheme funds is limited and must be monitored, and any loss that is reported must be done without delay. The only reason why we might decline an application, as I've mentioned at nauseam, no valid certificate is in place for that managing agent. There's a lack of internal controls and no dual verification process. Checks and balances is very, very important in the world of fidelity guarantee anyway. Any prior losses or lack of oversight or failure to comply with the CSOS regulations and absence of clear bank verification practices. Those are some of the key reasons why an application might be declined. The reason why we're not keen on self-managed schemes is often due to a lack of formal processes and segregation of duties. They tend to bypass two authority approval processes. They may rely on a single trustee or have informal arrangements in place. They're generally higher exposure to fraud due to those lack of checks and balances. And so for that reason, we will either charge higher premiums. You'll see there's even a higher deductible in those cases where we would have granted the cover, or otherwise it might just be a decline outright. So although the policy excludes external cybercrime, like hackers and ransomware and downstream attack, it does provide cover for internal fraud that involves a digital process. But the requirement is that it needs to be committed by an insurable person. So the policy covers fraud via unauthorized access or manipulation of the scheme's computer system by an insurable person. It also covers the deletion or corruption of the scheme's data, again by an insurable person. Any malicious software that is introduced or inserted into the scheme's computer system by an insurable person. Any threats made to force the scheme to release any funds, that would be covered under the extortion extension. Any contractual penalties, fines that is payable due to financial losses from insured digital fraud, that would also be covered here. Fraudulent transfer instructions, where fake or tampered EFT instructions is created internally by an insurable person, is also covered here. And accidental fund transfers due to internal misdirection or error. Those are all the elements that would technically be covered under your insured events 2 that deals with the computer fraud element of the policy. So a little bit of a cheat sheet for you. Ensure that there's a full replacement value used in terms of the sums insured. Remember to include common property and unit improvements. Valuations are needed every 3 years. Public liability and fidelity are compulsory covers in terms of the CISOS Act, so please note that those must be included. And explain water apparatus replacements and repair in detail to the client so that they understand exactly how the policy can and will respond. And importantly, also review the key exclusions with our clients. That way we can also make sure that there's no nasty surprises at the time that it is needed for the cover to trigger. Moving on to our CBC product. Again, we categorize these risks. Looking at high risk, those are things where there's hazardous manufacturing, processing, and works in place. Things like crematoriums, chemical processes, or explosives that are being manufactured. When we look at medium or moderate type commercial building risk, that's where you've got things like light engineering, motor repairers, or non-hazardous storage. And then your lower risk deals with things like your offices, medical rooms, churches, and educational establishments. Looking to the product highlights, again, a lot of it you would have seen already manifested on the SEC side. The only thing that you don't really have here is the loss of rent, because rental is written under your business interruption section. But for the most part, it is all very similar to what we have already discussed under the SEC. Theft of exterior fixtures and fittings is also included here. Remember now, power surge on all the other products is automatically included for 20,000 Rand. Retaining walls, again, needs to be approved, even though it forms part of the extensions. Included for 1 million Rand there. Hail damage to skylight, your escalation, and your inflation. Your optional extensions also very similar to what we had under the sectional title product. You see, what's nice about consistency and uniformity? If you have something that is structured and pretty similar, it also helps you to be able to sell and discuss the products with the clients. Additional sections here, public liability is included for 50 million Rand on this product, but is subject to a premium, and employer's liability then at 10 million. Other sections available, we have our business interruption. The default position there is 25% of the building sum insured, and we write up to a 36-month indemnity period. Machinery breakdown can be added for specified items and your directors and officers liability that I mentioned earlier on. This is now the type of product that you would add that onto. We will call for a proposal form as well as financials when we are underwriting this section. Looking to our HOAs. So high risk, here you're looking at mixed use estates, residential, lodges, mature lifestyle estates. Medium risk is your mid-sized residential estate with shared amenities. Your lower risk is your freehold residential estate with no amenities. Your risk drivers there on high risk obviously looks at the complexity in terms of the use and the shared responsibilities. From an insurance impact, you've got multiple liability exposures. Under your moderate risk drivers, you've got shared amenities, which introduce third-party exposure, a greater dependency on the HRA in terms of maintenance and safety compliance. Again, liability exposure that's linked to recreational facilities. From a low-risk perspective, there you'll see there's minimal shared infrastructures, and residents usually insure their own property individually. It's a favorable risk due to the limited HRA obligations, and your liability claims are in fact far less than what you would see manifesting under the other products. Again, our product highlights are similar to what we've already embraced on our SEC and CBC products. Of course, your loss of rental and BI covers do not manifest under an HOA product because those covers would usually be taken care of under the individual property themselves. The same rules apply in terms of retaining walls and hail damage, escalation and inflation being included. Optional extensions here, we have our additional CPC, additional escalation, and of course you've got your installed solar system. Under your HOA product, we include the 100,000 for money cover, liability, employer's liability, machinery breakdown, and personal accident. Your other sections that can be written in here, you've got your electronic equipment for specified items, as well as your directors and officers liability. Most of our excesses are pretty similar. So what I've done for you is I've grouped together the types of perils that would trigger your variable excesses. So those perils would be 20% of claim with a minimum of 2,750. They're all capped at a maximum of 10,000 Rand. So there you're looking at impact, storm, hail, snow, wood, laminate, bamboo flooring, shade nets, carports and awnings, and occupancy for water damage, your theft, and lightning without an SPD type 2. When it comes to surge protection devices, there are 4 types of SPDs that you can get. Type 1 SPDs, those are normally installed at the primary distribution board and work best when used alongside a SPD type 2 for comprehensive protection. When there's a lightning protection system in place, the type 1 is usually a must. Type 2 SPDs are important because they actually protect electrical systems and connected equipment from sudden voltage spikes. When you're looking at an SPD type 3, those actually have a limited capacity to handle surges, and they are typically used as an extra layer of protection in addition to an SPD type 2. So you'll see with an SPD type 1 and 3, their efficacy is really dependent on an SPD type 2 being in place. If the client has an SPD type 2 and there's lightning, we actually waive the excess entirely. So the client will not be required to pay an excess for lightning-related damage. This is different though when we reach power surge excesses. Standard fixed excesses, we are looking at perils like earthquake, where you've got 2,750 as a fixed excess. Our water apparatus repair benefit does not carry an excess. Clients can also elect to have excess buyback. So if they've been elected that as an optional extension, this 2,000 Rand fixed excess does not apply. All other general claims have a fixed excess of 1,250 Rand. All other sections, so that's like your money section and your liability sections, those all carry a standard 2,500 Rand deductible. If we're looking at our subsidence and landslip, that covers a deductible of 3% of the sum insured up to a maximum of 250,000 Rand. Power surge is a different kettle of fish. Here we have compulsory deductibles. And what drives the type of deductible really is based on whether that SPD type 2 is installed or not. If the client has an SPD type 2, the excess for power surge is set at 10% of claim at a minimum of 2,750 Rand. Without the SPD type 2, that percentile is then increased to 25% of the claim. If we look at our installed solar system, fire-related claims, those are 10%, minimum 1,500, with your theft and malicious damage type claims set at 10%, minimum 2.5. Fidelity, if it's managed by an agent, the excess is 2,500. However, if it's a self-managed scheme, and this is what I alluded to earlier on, this is where we have an increased excess of 20% of claim, minimum 25,000. So why should you actually consider these products? I first of all just want to mention that CIB boasts of having some of the lowest rejection rates in our industry. So very important. You have an excellent support team behind you. We have comprehensive, probably one of the most comprehensive market-related wordings in the market. It is tailored to community scheme compliance. High claims volumes, no problem. We actually handle these with ease. We have our own inbound call center, and we are able to give you tailored guidance throughout the process. We give you regular updates. We don't leave you hanging. We have a telephonic claim center, which is fast and efficient, and a very, very strong support system with dedicated portfolio managers and fast decisions. Our SB team is absolutely phenomenal. They have technical expertise second to none. So if you ever have any queries, please reach out to the referrals mailbox or reach out to our SB team. We will assist you every single step of the way. We are here to make your life easier. We don't want you to ever feel that you're stuck in a corner. We have nationwide presence. We have consistent product updates that are innovative, and we look at ways that we can help you to make sure that you're happy and have peace of mind with the risk that you're placing with us. We have competitive pricing and inflation-beating increases. We have a seamless IT platform for all our administration. And as I mentioned, an in-house claims handling solution with quick turnaround times. Certain things to consider. Some takeaways here. What you should always consider. Understand the scheme's legal obligations. Understand the constitutions that are in place. Ask questions so that you know how to give the client guidance in respect of how the cover needs to be placed. Assess property usage. I mean, is it pure residential? Is it commercial? Is it mixed? If it's a mixed use, what is the percentage? Is it maybe 80% commercial and 20% residential, or vice versa? Is it a 50-50% split? So just assess how that property is actually used. Ensure that there's accurate sums insured and valuations done every 3 years, especially on the SEC business. Very, very important. That's a legal requirement. Promote the value of non-mandatory but essential add-ons. Remember I mentioned earlier that it's not actually compulsory to have D&O cover, uh, but it really is highly recommended. Looking at things like fidelity covers, even on a standalone basis, and of course, motor, especially for your schemes and vehicles that are registered to the schemes. Manage the client expectations through policy education. You know, we're open to suggestions. If there's something you feel that we should look at or maybe consider in terms of a benefit, reach out to us. We don't shut the door. We say everything is welcomed with open ears and arms. And of course, we've already established that cyber is a big no-no. So we've got an extra layer of protection that we've now built into our specialized buildings products, because we've established already that although we've given cover on a commercial crime basis, it doesn't give any kind of comfort in regards to cyber events. What you can do is you can actually write the cyber section onto the product. It does have a standalone policy wording. There's a fixed sum insured of R1 million that is allocated for this body corporate type cover. There's a fixed deductible and a fixed premium. So if you feel that the client does actually have some sort of concern regarding cyber, you are more than welcome to reach out to us so we can try and assist you to get the body corporate endorsement onto your client's policy. But as I mentioned, it is a standalone policy wording that will apply. Cyber liability will cover the defense and settlement costs relating to compromised data, which is on the scheme's computer system. Very important. It needs to be a trigger to the actual scheme's computer system. Downstream attack where, for example, one of the trustees is working on a laptop in a coffee shop and they're perusing the internet and a hacker happens to infiltrate those security walls and breaches the trustee's laptop, that's not deemed to form part of the scope of this particular offering. Again, it really does look at the interests of the actual scheme's computer system itself. The policy also covers crisis management expenses for any PR campaigns and remediation services which are due to compromised data. It covers expenses for specialists to actually investigate, contain, manage, and recover data. It provides cover for specialists to investigate, recover, negotiate, and settle any extortion amounts where cyber extortion is concerned. And it also covers digital media liability, which could arise through virtue of defamation or unintentional copyright infringement or unintentional infringement of rights to privacy. There's a separate call center number that is dealt with in terms of cyber covers, and yeah, reach out to us and we'll give you guidance as to how we can assist you where that is concerned. Looking at some claims examples, I think prevention is sometimes better than cure. But what we see a lot of the time is that, unfortunately, the conditions of the policy are breached. And this is where you will see how excluded risk versus policy conditions and actual duties to take reasonable steps and precautions manifests itself. So in this example, the ceiling in the bathroom was reported that it is collapsing. A contractor was actually sent out to the unit to assess the matter to discover that the geysers were falling out of place and that the cause was that the ceiling is collapsing. I've actually taken these snips exactly word for word from the applicable claim. The findings were that the installation of the geyser was actually done incorrectly. The geyser feet were not in line with the platform plank. Because the geyser is round, the weight of the geyser and water in the geyser automatically pushed the planks out, and this is because the plumber did not install the geyser feet in line with the platform plank. Once the planks are past the geyser and only under the pan, the geyser will collapse and cause damage. I mean, you can actually see, I don't know how anybody cannot notice that something's awry in that roof. But anyway, unfortunately, this claim was rejected. Firstly, because it forms part of the exclusions with regards to damage happening over a period of time, as well as incorrect installation or defective workmanship. It also triggered the duty to take reasonable steps and precautions. And then under your buildings and common property component, where it speaks then directly to faulty materials, defective or faulty workmanship. The next claim was a boundary wall has collapsed due to storm. The findings here was that the boundary wall in question is a 220 millimeter double-skinned common property retaining wall. The wall measures 2.6 meters in height. The wall retains soil to the full height of the wall. The wall does not meet past or present building regulations. That does not help. The wall is not constructed with reinforcement or are any weep holes constructed. Weep holes are very, very important. They're not there just for aesthetic purposes, and I think sometimes people forget that. Retaining walls should be specifically designed by an engineer to resist the lateral pressure and must be built to withstand various loads, including soil and water pressure. Neither an engineer stability certificate or approved municipal plan for the wall was provided for that wall in question. If we look at how the policy then responded, and you could see that this is quite a concern. It actually looks like the house that Jack built. But irrespective, unfortunately, the claim was rejected because it did not meet the criteria. It wasn't constructed according to engineering specifications. It didn't have the weep holes that were required, and effectively also resulted in the client actually not fulfilling the duty to take reasonable steps and precautions. You know, another concern when it comes to walls and retaining walls especially is that it's not only the material damage component that comes into play, it's also the liability hazard that is really adding to the exposure. I mean, if a wall collapses on a person or their vehicle or a child, you know, it can have far-reaching consequences. So again, we really do urge our clients to adhere to the requirements that the law has in place. And it's there to protect them, not only the insurer. Our next offender here is a roof leak. Additionally, the claim was also not reported within that 31-day period. The findings were that the insured property was inspected and general deterioration of the waterproofing was observed throughout all 7 blocks of flats. Your roof tiles had shifted, they were broken and missing in certain areas. There was mortar between the tiled ridges. They were falling out, and in certain instances, they were actually non-existent. The valleys were previously sealed with a membrane, which was poorly done, which exacerbated the loss. And the damage seen on the roofs is as a result of general deterioration, wear and tear, and poor workmanship. Again, as you could see, it doesn't help that the claims conditions weren't followed. There was late notification. You know, it really does have it prejudices an insurer when claims conditions are not actually observed, because in many instances we are not afforded the opportunity to go and investigate things to the levels that we need to. And one of the notice provisions is that when an event happens, the client needs to do everything within their ability to notify us, and within that period of 31 days. And we do need full written details of that event, as well as any supporting documents to support the claim. Additionally, as you know, under your excluded risks, we are looking at things of damage happening over a period of time. Here you can clearly see it was as a result of poor maintenance and the duty to take reasonable steps and precautions once again. A lot of the time, there is damage that can be avoided, and people just need to remain diligent when it comes to maintenance and make sure that things are kept in a good state of repair. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, I actually can't believe it. We've run through the session so quickly, uh, but I am very grateful for everybody's participation today. I wish to thank you. I know that time spent is usually very valuable, so I appreciate everybody that's taken the time to join us today. I urge you to please reach out to the referrals mailbox with any queries or questions that you have. If you would like a copy of the presentation or even the link to the presentation itself, reach out and I will make sure that you definitely get a copy without delay. I thank you again and I hope you have a fantastic, fantastic week further. Thank you. Keep well.